Well, welcome to Askew's Meat Department. This is our wrapping area, and this is where most of the product gets made. And this is our stuffer. So this is where we make sausage and haggis. I started the sausage program here pretty much, and haggis is like the advanced version of sausage, I would say. To me, I like to think of haggis as I guess traditionally it was the parts that you may not have been able to consume otherwise, and so they found ways to do it in ancient Scotland, I assume, and so they brought up the nutritional value of it by adding grains, and so they made a kind of all-around package of meat and grains and a hearty kind of treat. So this is our stuffer. Stick all the product down into here, pat it in there to make sure there's no air bubbles. This stuffer will hold 25 pounds. And then guide the sausage as it comes out through there. The paddle in there will push it down, then extrude out this end. So haggis is, I like to think of as like ground meats mixed with spices and steel-cut oats is what we use. And then you take it all and form it into the bung casing, it's called. So it's a beef, as far as I understand it, it's the first stomach of the beef, although it has been put into other casings. Traditionally, what we use here is the bung casing. You have to cook up certain parts of the ingredients first, and some of the ingredients are left raw. And of course, I toast the oats first to bring out more flavor in them. And then it all kind of gets mixed together, and you gotta heat some parts up and cool other parts down in a proper kind of sequence. It's an all-day affair if you're trying to make it. We make a couple 100 pounds for each holiday at least. And it's amazing how many people have placed their orders with us once we started doing it. We did some research because we actually were requested by one group to make haggis for them. And so we said, okay, great, let's try and do this. And so we did some online research and kind of made an amalgamation of a few different recipes. And then, of course, we took feedback from our customers and tweaked the recipe here and there. So the most of the product is taken up by ground beef, and then there's lamb, and of course beef suet, which is a kind of a granular, more fat. And then we actually make our own bone broth here in the store. So in order to extract all the nutrients from bone broth, you have to cook the bones really slowly for at least 24 hours. And so we do that beforehand, and then that is incorporated into our recipe as well. And then there's beef hearts and beef liver gets mixed into it. For the liver, I have to cook it. Not overcook it because it will blacken quickly, but you have to cook it in water. I think it's for at least half an hour, and then it gets ground up with all the other stuff. And then of course, I'm not a huge fan of them, and I always cry when I cut them up, but there are quite a few onions that we have to put into the recipe as well. And then of course there's all the spices like ground mustard and black pepper, and I was requested to add some sage to it, so we're going to tweak the recipe there a little bit. This stuffer can hold 25 pounds of product at once, which is really handy when we have the huge batches of haggis to make. It's tons of fun because it certainly makes my days a lot more interesting. There's so many different pieces to it, and you have to time everything just right in order to make it in one day. So you have to have this cooking while this is cooling down, and then you have to have another ingredient cooking while that one's cooling down. It is an all-day affair to make haggis. This is a fancy European model, Trispade, I think. And so our makers will stick the product in here, and it extrudes out the horn on this side after the product. And so there's a great big beef casing that hangs off of this. And as this gets turned, it extrudes kind of like exactly like making sausage, but in a much bigger format. Prior to making the haggis, I was kind of the lead sausage maker here at Askew's, and a lot of the elements apply to both. You have to watch the consistency, and we call it protein extraction. So that's where you're mixing things, and it's like emulsification, like what you do with eggs in baking. You use the eggs to bind the product together. Here we don't throw eggs in it, so we have to bind the product together through physically mixing it and a couple other ingredients that help along the process. So if we mixed it for too long, it would be really thick like a sausage, and you'd be able to slice straight through it, and it would keep a uniform line all the way through it like you cut it with a razor. Whereas some people want it more like a meatloaf, which crumbles a bit. All my grandparents, as far as I know, are from England, Ireland, Scotland. So before that happens, we have to mix it through our grinder over here. So on this side, there's little pinholes kind of thing, and the meat will come out of there. This is small pinholes. We have ones that are closer to the size of my thumb, and we call that the kidney plate because they're shaped like kidney beans. And the meat will come out of there in bigger chunks, and then we won't put it through the small plate like this because it'll be formed into too small of particles, and people don't want their haggis to be too runny, I guess. There's all sorts of fibers to be found in the fats of animals. So sausage makers know that fat from the belly of a pork is completely different from the fat from the shoulder. So it's a different consistency, and you want to be careful which kinds you use. And then it comes over here to our bowl mixer. So there's a big paddle that comes off this and kind of whips everything, just like you have at home, like your mixers, your Betty Crockers, only for meat. And then the final process is extruding it into the bung casings. And then, of course, cooling it down afterwards, because the machines will all heat it up a little bit. Yep. The biggest hurdle for people is thinking about the ingredients that go into it. But I know my dad loves liver, like nothing wrong with it. And I'm sure in the European countries, the offals are a lot better received than they are here, like liver, heart, and kidneys, etc. But I just tell people, if you're grossed out by it, don't think about the ingredients, just think that it tastes, as it's all ground up, it tastes like ground beef with a lot of extra spices in it. And it could taste like meatloaf to you, or it could taste like a heartier sausage. We have people asking for our special haggis we make here in Armstrong. And over here in Canada, we have a huge haggis tradition.